evening, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes. So, I'm Amanda. Hello. This is my first time to actually speak at the mic. I've been here listening to other wonderful stories many, many times. Last month was very interesting because there were just women speakers, and one of them started talking about a lot of cat stories, and I'm a bit crazy about cats, and it got me thinking, well, actually, there's a story I could share about a cat that I had 34 years ago. It's as old as Charles's story. And the setting is China. Let me take you back. 34 years ago, 1981 to 1982, that was the year when Chariots of Fire won all those Oscars, and if you're an Anglophile, it was also the year that Margaret Thatcher took Great Britain to war against the Argentinians over the Falkland Islands. So this is when I set off to China with my new teaching diploma and 3 years of teaching experience, but that wasn't enough experience of life and the world really to prepare me for what I was going to meet in China. Because in China, things are never what they appear. I was one of a group of 6 volunteers. We belonged to VSO, Voluntary Service Overseas, which was a British equivalent of the Peace Corps. And the British government were very pleased to send its first 6 volunteers into China, because at this time, China was still a very closed country, still under the very strict communist system regime, and Chinese people were all dressed alike in grey or brown or dark blue suits, and they lived a very regimented life. But there were other foreigners, and they were called foreign experts, and they were few and far between, but they were treated completely differently. They were housed in special accommodation, and they were paid in a Chinese foreign currency. And so they had a quite restricted lifestyle because they could only use their money in certain hotels and locations in China. We were in a different category. We were supposed to be living alongside our colleagues and being paid in the regular Chinese currency and receiving the same ration coupons that the Chinese received. At that time, things were rationed. Cotton for clothes was rationed. Cooking oil was rationed. Rice was rationed. Wheat was rationed. Sugar was rationed. And so we had to watch how much we ate as well. In fact, for our needs, the rations were very generous. To get to the point. So there were 6 of us dispersed around China. I was very lucky because I was with a colleague called Hillary, and 2 of us went to the same college, and it was in the countryside. It was in Hunan province, which is in the south centre part of China, and we were about half an hour bus ride outside the main city, Changsha. Chinese people all know Changsha because that's where Mao Zedong was a student. But that's about its only claim to fame and loveliness. But we were really lucky to be outside the city and in this college because it was an agricultural college. We were surrounded by fields, and going there was like stepping back into a timeless landscape with rich red earth and green crops and people working in the fields with their conical straw hats and water buffalo ploughing the fields. So it was great to escape the college and find tranquility there. We needed it quite often. The college itself was a collection of dusty buildings. Most of them were concrete and some of them were red brick. The college professors were housed in concrete apartment blocks. Each professor and their family had one room, and not a big room. About 8 tatami mats, perhaps. Cooking was done in the corridors, and all bathrooms and toilets were shared. We think that cramped living conditions here in Japan, but no, in China it's really different. But we didn't know this, not for a long time, because Hilary and I had an apartment with a living room, a study, a bedroom, and a bathroom, each. And ours was one of the red brick buildings, and I was upstairs and Hilary was downstairs. We also had a cook and a sidekick, but that's another story for another day. And they didn't last very long, thankfully. We had minders, and minder-in-chief was the president's daughter, the college president's daughter. She was a young woman, she was younger than us, but she had reasonably good English, and it was her duty to mind us, translate sometimes, but mostly keep an eye on us and report back about what we were doing. And it was the college president's daughter that presented me with my kitten, Poppy. This was a few months after we'd settled in, and mysteriously, she knew that I liked cats. And so she brought this delightful little bundle of fur, probably about 8 or 9 weeks old, perhaps, and gave it to me. Now, Hilary is allergic to cats, so Poppy had to live with me upstairs. But we became attached very, very quickly. She had green eyes and she was tabby, and she had this delightful habit of attaching herself to my leg and then climbing up and sitting on my shoulder. And so I would go around my daily life, even bending over the bath doing the washing, with Poppy on my shoulder. But a few weeks later, we were due to meet up with the other volunteers and to go off for a couple of weeks, travelling in China together. So I had to hand Poppy back to the president's daughter to look after for those 2 weeks. It was with some misgivings, because as you can imagine, with rationing, food was scarce in China, and at this time pets were considered a bourgeois luxury. Cats were tolerated, but more often went into the cooking pot. And so I waved goodbye to Poppy with the assurances of the president's daughter that she was going to be fine. 2 weeks later we come back, looking forward to my joyful reunion. The president's daughter arrives with his cat in her arms, and it looks like Poppy. It's bigger, but cats that age do grow. It was more or less the same colour, but it had changed in a really radical way. When I checked, I said, this isn't Poppy. Yes, yes, Poppy. No, this isn't Poppy. Poppy's a girl. This is a boy. That was the first time the president's daughter was lost for words. Anyway, I agreed to keep Poppy's replacement, but sadly, that cat never settled and disappeared a few weeks later. And when the president's daughter was eager to replace it, I said, no, no, no. One heartbreak is enough. And she didn't know that Hilary and I were hearing so many heartbreak stories from the human side, from our students in the college. So I was employed to teach agricultural scientists, and Hilary was teaching people who were told to become English teachers. And they had been sent to her classroom all around the region. One guy only spoke German, and he had to retrain to become an English teacher. Most of them were rather too old to start learning to become an English teacher. But my students were agricultural scientists, and so they needed English. But my students were even older than Hilary's students. Most of mine were middle-aged to elderly, and it was clear that my lessons were a perk, a thank you for good service to the party. Once a week I did teach the undergraduates, one evening a week, but although I enjoyed the classes very much, it really wasn't worthwhile. One student in my class, mysteriously, was a medical doctor, and he was about my age, and we actually became quite friendly. To get on to the point, one of the students in Hillary's class was a lovely lady, but she always looked so sad. She was the mother of baby twin boys, and a couple of years earlier than this, the Chinese government had introduced the one-child per family policy. And when she had her twins, the attitude at her work unit was, well, you are far more fortunate than other families because you have 2 children. But we will only give you ration coupons for 1 child. But we recommend that you send one of your children to your parents to raise. And she and her husband felt really they had no option because they couldn't raise 2 children with their meagre rations. And her elderly parents, far, far away in the north of China, would be able to take in 1 more child. But how do you decide which twin to send away? And her story has always haunted me, and particularly because 19 years ago I was the mother of baby twin boys. And I've always asked me, how did she decide? I don't know how I would have made that decision. So it was a really tough totalitarian state to live under. And this one child per family policy had a lot of impact on a lot of lives. Towards the end of our stay, Hillary and I had won our right to freedom to take the bus into the city on a Saturday without the President's daughter watching over us. And we would relax, we would meet up with some of the foreign experts in the foreign visitors hotel and exchange stories, and then come back. The buses were really, really crowded, so we usually didn't manage to sit together. One afternoon, on our way back, I was sitting next to a man on the bus who spoke quite good English and was eager to practice. And he turned round and said, "Oh, my wife and my son are at the back of the bus. Could you wave to them?" So I looked round, and there was a woman and a little girl sitting at the back of the bus. And so I turned round to him and I said, "Do you mean your wife and your daughter?" Thinking it was a vocabulary mistake. "No, my wife and my son." So I looked again. This child had long hair in 2 pigtails with red ribbons. And I said, "Your child is a boy?" He said, "Yes." And I said, "He doesn't look like a boy." He said, "Oh, yes. My wife and I always wanted a girl, and we were only allowed to have 1 child, and so we dress him and treat him like a girl." He must have noticed the look on my face, and I said, "Do you think this is going to be a problem for him?" He said, "Oh, no problem. Next year he starts school. We're going to cut his hair next year." Well, my cat had her gender reassigned, and I still wonder today what was the effect on that little boy to have had his gender reassigned 2 times. So there were many shocking things that were not what they seemed in China, but I'll end on a very happy story. Right at the end of my stay, I gained extra freedom to travel by myself, and I made a few trips, and one of them was to Yellow Mountain. It's one of the 7 sacred mountains around China, and what you do, you spend the whole day climbing up, and then you stay overnight at the top, and then wait for the sun to rise. And I set off on my own up the mountain. It was really beautiful. It was stunning scenery and totally unspoilt. There were hundreds of other Chinese people, but very soon I found myself taken under the wing of a lovely young couple. The young man was actually from Hong Kong, and the girl was from mainland China. They met up once a year when he got the chance to come over from Hong Kong. and they went somewhere special together. And being from Hong Kong, his English was really quite good, and so it was really fun climbing up together with them. When we got to the top, they insisted that I share the room with them. And, well, you know the English expression, a gooseberry? I felt like a gooseberry 100-fold. No, I can't do this. No, they absolutely insisted I shared the room and spent the night with them. And then I remembered my medical friend, doctor, student, who had told me in all sincerity, oh, in China, we only have sex on Saturday nights because the government tells us we need to keep our energy for our work the rest of the week. I thought, well, it's Tuesday tonight. Maybe I'm not going to spoil the party. So I agreed, and I was woken from very deep sleep around 4 o'clock in the morning. Got up, we put on these big Chinese army coats, and although there were hundreds of people lined up along the mountain ridge, there was utter silence and reverence, because below us was a sea of clouds. It was the most beautiful sight, with the mountain peaks like islands in the misty sea below. And then gradually, as the sun started to come up, the clouds were tinted rose colour and then blood red. I thought, wow, this is the colour of communism. But it's the colour of passion, and it's the colour of humanity. And I could see when the sun came up, well, there are plenty of chinks in this totalitarian state, and the humanity is shining through. And that couple were just revived my soul. And we skipped down the mountain. I had to say goodbye. And a few days later, I was on a train to Moscow, knowing that I would never see any of those people in China ever again. But they're still here in my heart.